Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Below the Surface edition of the Bonfire Briefing Podcast. I am your host, Taylor, and I'm doing this episode solo today. I was hoping that, Alex might be able to join me again for this one. We've been on a pretty good streak recently, but he actually just recently started a new job and moved. So he's been pretty busy. Like I said, we were planning to do another episode tonight. It's Monday night, pretty late Monday night, actually. And speaking of that, I know that a lot of our episodes have, been uploaded on Tuesday instead of Monday, and Monday was the norm for, a long time. It's just turned out that, for he and I, because there's been a lack of guests on recently, it just seems that Monday kind of works out better for the both of us to upload. So I don't know if that's going to be a permanent change moving forward or not. I kind of like the idea of the show being uploaded on Monday and people being able to listen to it, on the road, at work, starting off the week with it. I really like the idea of that, but if we keep recording late at night, then I'm not gonna edit the podcast and upload it and create a video for YouTube and do all that stuff late Monday night. So I don't know. I'll think a little bit more about it. I'm just not really sure how I want to go about doing that. So if I do make a permanent decision to change the upload date from Monday to Tuesday, I will let you guys know. Let's just get into it. I don't have any booze with me tonight. Even if I did, I don't know that I'd be drinking it. It is very, very late. I do have a Diet Dr. Pepper. I really like the zero sugar cherry Dr. Peppers, but they didn't have one at the store that I went to, which was a pretty big bummer. But a Diet Dr. Pepper will do just fine. I don't do sugary soft drinks. It's just too much sugar. I've been working on, losing some weight and trying to eat a little bit healthier. I don't need to be drinking, all those calories, all that sugar. I also personally, maybe this is because I've been drinking them for so long, but I kind of just like diet soft drinks more than I do, sugary ones. Maybe that makes me a little odd, a little weird, whatever. But when it comes to, like Dr. Pepper, Coke, I don't really, I was trying to think of some others. I don't drink Pepsi. I think one, one thing where I differ, one soft drink where it is different is Sprite. Like, I don't really like the zero sugar Sprites all that much. If I was going to get a Sprite, I would get, like a regular Sprite. And actually, before we hop into, there's been some fights. We have some pretty big fights coming up this weekend. We've had finals basketball going on. Definitely going to talk about that Heat win in Game 2. Something else I've been thinking about doing with the podcast, just, before we really hop into some of the bigger subjects of the day, I guess. I've floated the idea. Well, actually, I don't know that I've done that on this podcast, but just kind of privately with Alex and whoever else. I've floated the idea of maybe doing like a history podcast. I like having guests on. That's, the primary reason that I'm doing the show. I like talking with interesting guests, whether they're MMA fighters or like politicians or just whatever it is. I really like talking to interesting guests, and that'll always be like the primary kind of show that I'm shooting for. I know I haven't had a whole lot of guests on recently, but I will. I am trying to remedy that. It's just kind of, like the election season for like state level and local level races just hasn't really blown up all that much yet. I mean, I know the presidential election is really starting to kick in gear, but it was always going to start sooner than a lot of these lower races, which is where I like to pick up guests. So, and like I've already had I think 3 of the what are there, 5 total libertarian candidates, presidential candidates, I mean. And I've reached out to the other 2, haven't heard back from them. Sadly, would love to have Chase Oliver and Lars Mapstead on the show too. But these state level and local level races just haven't really picked up all that much yet. So that's kind of why you've been seeing more below the surface episodes. And I do really like the below the surface episodes. It was with Alex that, quite a few years ago now, actually, we thought of having a podcast, and just because of, both of us like graduating college at different times and like moving around and, getting different jobs and everything like that. It just, it wasn't really possible back then, but it is possible now. So I really like doing the below the surface episodes. It's a lot of fun to, maybe have a drink or two and, just kind of get on here and bullshit about, politics, sports, just kind of whatever's going on in the news. I don't know if it's the right time to do it or what have you, right? But if I was going to introduce 2 other things to, the Bonfire Briefing Podcast, universe, or whatever you want to call it, it would be a history podcast, which is probably if I do decide to start like another special kind of episode, it would still be a part of this same podcast. It would just take the place of a guest episode or a below the surface episode. Probably. Alex and I have kind of, tossed around the idea of maybe doing an additional show in the week. I don't know that I really want to do all that. But we'll see. But I think like a history show would be really cool, or like maybe a true crime one. I really don't know. Not that there's not a lot of history podcasts out there, but there are a lot of true crime podcasts and shows and everything like that out there. But those 4 areas right there, right? So like politics and sports, we kind of talk about with the guests, and then the below the surface episodes, and then history and true crime. Those are like the 4 big areas that I think, if I took some time to do some research, make some notes, everything like that, I think I could make a really good show. But we haven't made any solid decisions on whether or not to expand into doing another show like that. If we did, though, it would almost certainly be history. We're both, Alex and I both are just big fans of history, constantly, watching different documentaries and videos and podcasts and everything of the like, of just different historical stuff. And I always thought it would be really cool to do a podcast about like weird history stuff, like just, stuff you wouldn't necessarily find in your textbook. Just kind of real weird off the wall stories in history that a lot of people maybe don't know about, or, something like that. I know it's not really as weird, the topic broadly isn't all that weird, but I think maybe I said on here one time that I thought it would be cool to like kick off a history series about Prohibition, because we like to, Alex and I like to come on here and have a couple of drinks. So it would be funny if we could find some like weird or odd or, whatever things during the Prohibition era and talk about them on the show, while having a couple of beverages, which would not have been cool during Prohibition, obviously. So I don't know. It's just something we've been thinking about. I've been kind of thinking maybe we would take a topic or a story or a person or what have you, and maybe split it up into 3 episodes. And then, we would just walk through everything we have for that subject or that historical event. Again, I'm not really sure if we will end up doing that. Maybe we will, maybe we won't, but it is an idea we've been tossing around. I think it would be a lot of fun. Again, it would probably just take place, we would release it on a Monday or a Tuesday like we would our regular weekly episodes. But if we did do a history show, it almost certainly would take the place of a guest episode or a below the surface episode. I'm not really sold on the idea of doing 2 podcast episodes a month. or a week rather. Sometimes it's hard to squeeze in the one that we do, with work and everything like that. I'm also moving soon, so it's just kind of, there's a lot of different stuff up in the air, and I don't know that maybe like right now, this month is the right time to expand the Bonfire Briefing podcast, but maybe we will in the future. So again, I'll keep you guys updated, and I'll be on the lookout. I mean, I consume a fair amount of history content as it is, so I'll always be looking out for stuff, and maybe making a couple of notes on some potential things to do episodes on. Because if I did do a history thing, I would want it to really, be well researched, and I would want it to be, I would want the podcast to be a mix of, both informative and entertaining. We want to make sure that, we're not talking out of our ass, that we know what we're talking about. What we're talking about is backed up by legitimate sources. And, but, we'd also want to, have a beer or two and crack some jokes. So I don't know. It's just something I've been thinking about. But anyway, there's been a fair amount of, different sports things going on this past weekend. I'll hop into basketball a little bit first, because I probably have a little less to say about the finals than I do, these fights this past weekend and the fights we have coming up this weekend. You got a title fight, Charles Oliveira's fight. It's going to be great. But yeah, I don't know, if you guys saw, but the Heat won game 2. It was very close, though, I will say. I tuned in a little late, but it was pretty close, kind of all throughout the part of the game that I watched. And I saw a lot of people were pretty excited for the Heat. I feel like a lot of people have doubted them. I guess myself included. I did say that I thought Denver would win this series in 6 games, which is still very possible. Not that isn't possible, but the Heat haven't dug themselves into a hole. Denver won game 1, and they responded right back, and they did so very well, I thought. I mean, a lot of their guys just had really good games. Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo did what they were supposed to do. They had good games. Gabe Vincent, who, shout out to him, man. He's been, such a great performer for the Heat, really, during this whole playoffs run for them. 20-something points in this past game, and he had 30-something during a game against the Celtics, I think. Maybe he did that multiple times, but there was one game of his during the Celtics I was particularly impressed with. So it was really just a great all-around effort by the Heat to beat the Nuggets. And like I said, it was close. Jokic himself did have a tremendous game. A double-double, 41 points, 11 boards. Jamal Murray had a double-double too, 18 points, 10 assists. But everyone else kind of, didn't really apply the pressure like they did in game 1. They didn't really perform up to, really what you want a team in the finals to do. It kind of felt like everyone, maybe not everyone else, but, I feel like guys like Aaron Gordon maybe, didn't perform as well as they have in some previous games that we've seen them in. Same thing with like KCP and Michael Porter Jr. They just kind of it was mostly Jokic and Jamal Murray keeping them alive in that game, and they almost did it. Murray had that shot there at the end. Seemed kind of odd to me that he didn't pass it to Jokic. Jokic was wide open there on the perimeter. I don't know. And it's not like Murray, just shot a bad shot. It wasn't a bad shot. It just didn't go in. But he did have Jokic to his right there, just wide open. So, I'm not a Denver fan. And, despite me picking them to win this series, I'm actually rooting for the Heat. I would rather, out of everybody who's in the playoffs right now, I would rather see Jimmy Butler get a ring than anyone else. Jokic is a great player. He is, there's no doubt about it. He's one of the best players in the league. I think him getting a ring would be cool. But I think Jimmy he like really needs one, man. He's shown out in these playoff performances just kind of over the past couple of years with the Heat, and a ring and maybe a finals MVP would really put him in Heat legend conversation, like with D Wade and Bron and Shaq. I mean, it would really cement him as a Heat legend. And he would be, those three players that I just mentioned, they all played with one another whenever they got the ring. Jimmy Butler would be able to say, not that he did it on his own, but that he didn't do it with LeBron, D Wade, or Shaq, who are some of the greatest players of all time. I think it would be really cool. I mean, Jimmy Butler has a great story. If you're a basketball fan, you know it by now. But there's going to be like a Netflix series, documentary made about him in the future or something. And I mean, how cool would it be if in that documentary there was a finals win, not just a bubble finals appearance, but a finals win. Also, that would make for a better story, to lose the finals that back then, but then to come around and, get the job done in 2023. I think that would be really cool. But, the series isn't over. Like I said, Denver has plenty of opportunity to come back and win this series. And like I said, maybe win it 4-2. I don't know. Wouldn't be, if you follow my Twitter, particularly my MMA tweets on Saturday, you would know that it wouldn't be the first of my predictions to go wrong. I mean, I don't know how I did this past weekend on my my MMA predictions for the Cara France Albazi card, but it's pretty hit or miss. If you're taking my MMA predictions off Twitter as betting advice, do yourself a favor and stop. Believe me, I know it doesn't always work out. In fact, more often than not, it doesn't. I thought there were some fun fights, this past weekend. We will talk about the main event decision. We will get there. It was a bad one. It sucked. But, I just feel like a lot of people were talking trash about this card before. And, was it the best card ever? It wasn't. Even, the fights, they weren't bad. But, it's an ESPN card, guys. It's not a pay-per-view. You know what I mean? Like, it's just not every card is going to knock your socks off, right? Especially when judges screw some of the fighters out of a win there, But there were some pretty good performances. I mean, Damon Blackshear in the prelims, first finish of the prelims, he got the job done. He's a pretty exciting guy. You go through, some of his pre-UFC career, and he's kind of more of a submission guy, but here in the UFC, he's kind of started to really get the job done with his hands. Great win for him. Jamie Malarkey, he looked fantastic, man. He did. He looked great for about a round and a half. He's got Ross Pearson in his corner. He looked great. He looked more. His striking was just tighter and more fluid. I mean, he looked better. And I've seen him fight plenty of times. He looked better Saturday night than he did probably any time that I've seen him fight. I don't know about that, but he did look really good. It just kind of looked like he had started putting some pieces together that maybe were missing earlier in his career. And then Muhammad Naimov just decked him. I mean, just caught him with, I think he was up against the cage, and it was like a counter hook or counter overhand, or I can't remember exactly what the punch was, but man, I mean, he just sat him down and finished him. It's, truly a crazy sport. You never know what can happen. I mean, over the, past year, we've seen some great comeback victories. The first fight between Pereira and Izzy, Izzy was a minute away from, winning a relatively uncompetitive fight. I mean, Pereira, he didn't really have anything for him until he slept him there with like a minute left in that final round. Same thing with Usman and Edwards. The first fight they had wasn't really that. It wasn't that competitive of a fight. Leon. They were talking about Leon Edwards as if he had given up. He was, he has come to peace with losing this decision, and then he whips out that head kick and becomes the new welterweight champion of the world. I also saw on Twitter somebody asked. They said, I can't remember exactly how they phrased it, but it was like, show me that MMA is truly a sport or truly a sport where anything can happen, or something like that. And I posted something about the Czech Congo Pat Barry fight, which if you've not seen the ending to that fight, it's absurd. It's so crazy. Czech Congo is just so hurt, just so many times throughout that. Like, other referees would have stopped the fight 2 or 3 times before that fight ended up getting called. Man, it's it's a fun one. Like I said, if you haven't seen it, I think I have that backwards. It was Congo that knocked out Barry. Yeah. I don't know. I got that mixed around in my head, but it was Congo that knocked out Barry. Congo was the one stumbling around, hurt, and he ended up getting the job done. So, I responded to that tweet with something about that. Just another great comeback victory. Probably the best comeback victory in UFC history that I've seen. I don't know that I've ever seen anybody that hurt come back and like knock unconscious their opponent. It wasn't like he came back and got a TKO or he knocked Pat Barry unconscious. Just a great all-time finish to a fight. And sadly, Malarkey got just a little bit of a taste of that on Saturday night. Really a shame, man, because like I said, he did look great before then. Another thing that was a shame, Andrei Arlovski getting knocked out by Dontel Mays. I love Andrei Arlovski. He's one of the few guys that's been fighting in the UFC longer than I've been watching. Well, his first run started well before I was into the UFC. Well, his first run in the UFC started when I was very young. Let me see. I do have him pulled up here. So he made his UFC debut in 2000. Yeah, I was less than 5 years old, and he's looked good, these past couple of years. It's not like he's looked bad. Getting knocked out Saturday sucks. And he did lose his fight before then, Marcos Rogerio de Lima. But he got submitted. It is what it is. But before then, he was on a 4-fight win streak. He won 6 of his last 7. His only loss in that stretch, that was 2020 to 2022. His only loss in that stretch was to Tom Aspinall, who is a tremendous heavyweight fighter, tremendous talent. Seen as many, myself included, as being one of the, up and coming heavyweight contenders. And I'm glad that he's, recovered from his injury, and we're going to get to see him fight very soon. But, I really like seeing Andrei Arlovski win these fights, this far into his MMA career. The guy's 44 years old. We're not going to get to see him fight for too much longer. So I was kind of hoping that maybe he would bounce back and, get another win in the win column. And, but no, sadly, it just didn't happen. Hats off to Dontel Mays. He looked great, nothing against the guy, but, you see somebody like Arlovski that you've watched fight for so long, and you watch him, get knocked out like that. It's not fun, man. It sucks. I always root for Andrei Arlovski whenever he's fighting, pretty much. I can't really think of anyone I'd root for over Arlovski. But just been following him forever, and I have no idea if he's going to retire after this one, or or how many fights he's got left on his contract, but I'll be rooting for the guy up until the day he retires. Speaking of my predictions, one fight that I did predict the Nurmagomedov fight wrong that started the card. I thought the fight was fairly close. I didn't really think some people thought the decision was a robbery. I didn't really think that. I thought it was pretty close. And in fact, I probably sided with the judges there. I probably thought Dos Santos had a little bit more going in that fight. But one fight I did predict correctly that was awesome to see. I mean, my second favorite finish of the night, Killer Karine Silva submitting Ketlin Souza with a knee bar. That thing was vicious. Knee bars, anytime you see them, are just wild, man. I'm going to see if I can pull that one up again one good time just so I can really see it again. But she looked great. I watched a little bit of her stuff before she came to the UFC just to kind of, because I wasn't really all that familiar with her, and watched a little bit of her stuff. And man, she looked great that night. I mean, yeah. Oh, here we go. Yeah. I mean, the way she hopped on and grabbed that leg, man, just really, oh my goodness. Oh, legs aren't supposed to bend that way, man. Oh my God. Oh no. Oh, the slow-mo replay. Whew. Wow. All right. I'm going to pause that. I don't need to see that no more. It was good enough the first time. Man, vicious knee bar. You just don't really see that many of them. And like to see a fight ended by a knee bar, not just to see someone attacking it, hoping that they get it, but to see someone finish a fight with a knee bar like that, you just don't see it all that often. So, and I mean, she got that done fairly quickly. I mean, first round, and Ketlin Souza's no slouch. You know what I mean? Like she's a very legit fighter in her own right. She's just came from Invicta. She was the Invicta flyweight championship over there. She's a good fighter. And Karine Silva was able to get her in a knee bar like that. So I don't know how many people are going to be signing up to fight Killer Karine Silva yet, but watch your knees. Vic Altamirano was the fight after that one. He fought Tim Elliott. Sadly, decision did not go his way. Fight didn't really go his way. I was rooting for him hard, man. I just watched him fight, back in March at the card here in San Antonio, and he won his fight there. He was the first guy to open up the card. He's the first fighter, he and his opponent, whose name I cannot remember right now. But he and his opponent are the first two UFC fighters that I got to see or got to watch in person live. So, I was already a fan of him before for coming on to the show, but, being able to watch him in person there in San Antonio just made it all even better. Just made me an even bigger fan of the guy. Even though the, fight might not have gone his way, it was still a fun fight to see. And Tim Elliott he's a tough opponent for anybody. He's looked good over the past couple of years. Won 4 of his last 5 fights. He's fought some of the best fighters in the flyweight division since he made his debut back in 2012. And he made that debut against John Dodson, just to tell you what kind of a fighter Tim Elliott is. Fought Joseph Benavidez, fought Demetrius Johnson for the title, a couple years back, Davison Figueiredo. I mean, he's a great fighter that, if you've been on the flyweight roster within the past 10 years, you've either won or lost to Tim Elliott. He's just a great fighter. He's looked good over these past couple of years, and, no shame at all to dropping a fight to a guy like that. And, I know Vic is going to bounce back and he's going to be even better than he has been before. He's still a pretty young guy as far as the UFC goes. So, no doubt in my mind, we'll probably see him fight before the end of the year. And he's going to bounce back better than ever. So, even though Saturday night didn't go his way, you're still a massive fan of Vic Altamirano. And, if you've if you haven't listened to my episode with him, definitely go back and do that. Watch some of his previous fights, man. He's a fun guy to watch fight. Speaking of fun guys to watch fight, Jim Miller. Man, if you watch Saturday night, you know what I'm talking about. Jim Miller flatlined Jesse Butler in the fight before the co-main event. I mean, just absolutely flatlined him. I think he was originally going to fight Jared Gordon, if I'm not mistaken. But man, and I don't know how far out that change got made. If Jesse Butler stepped up, hats off to him. But man, Jim Miller was not playing around out there Saturday night. He knocked Jesse Butler out clean 23 seconds. 23 seconds into the first round. Knocked him completely unconscious, man. I mean, if you need any further proof that Vic Altamirano has, plenty of time to bounce back and, go far in the UFC. I mean, Jim Miller's 39, won the most fights in UFC history. He's had the most fights in UFC history. I think he's second for finishes. I don't know if that knockout put him at first or not. Let me check that out real quick. I don't know if it did. No, I think Oliveira's got him beat by 2. Hey, Jim Miller said he wants to fight to UFC 300, so you don't know. He like first round knockout, 23 seconds. He doesn't really seem to be slowing down anytime soon, so that record might be his. Although Charles is literally fighting this weekend, and we will definitely talk about that. But I mean, I just hopped out of my seat when Jim Miller knocked him out. I mean, it was just it just happened so fast, and you can't doubt a guy like Jim Miller. He's been in the game for so long. He's like Tim Elliott. If you've been in the flyweight division in the past decade, you've either won a fight against Tim Elliott or lost to him. The same is true for Jim Miller, but you can push that back to about the last 15 years, in the lightweight division. I mean, you've either fought him and won or fought him and lost. I mean, he's fought everybody, and he's still going strong. It's crazy to see. He's another one of those guys. I mean, how can you not like Jim Miller? He always throws down. He's given us some awesome submissions, some awesome knockouts over the years, great performances. I mean, he's just, if he's on a card, no matter where he's at on the card, it could be the first fight of the night. He could be at the bottom of the prelims. You got to catch that fight. Even if you don't care about any other fight on that card, you got to tune in and see what Jim Miller's going to do, because he might knock somebody out in 23 seconds. He might lock him up in a nasty guillotine choke. You just don't know. And I love him, man. I love to see that he's still going strong, that he wants to continue to fight for, a fairly long time. I don't know when UFC 300 would be. Let me see. When would that be? I know it's a little bit out there, but yeah, no. Well, yeah. When you Google it, the only thing that comes up is, Jim Miller talking about it. So, yeah, don't know when that would be, but if Jim Miller's still around and still putting on great performances like that, I want to see it. I guess we could talk about the main event. Actually, Alex Caceres did have a pretty good performance. Shout out to him. He did really well. He had Pineda in trouble there quite a few times during that fight. Just, he didn't really get the job done, but Bruce Leroy is, as exciting as ever to watch. So, and he's on a pretty good tear. I mean, for what it's worth, he's won 7 of his last 8 fights, stretching back to 2019. TKO Julian Erosa. I mean, he's looking good. I mean, and Pineda is not a bad win by any means. Yeah, I mean, Pineda is a pretty good win. He's been around for a long time. He's been a pro for a while, for what it's worth. So I don't know that Caceres is that far off from hopping back into the rankings. Or no, he is in the rankings. We had the same damn. Alex and I had this discussion last weekend. I was like, I don't know if he's in the ranking. He is. He's number 50. Well, I haven't checked if they've updated the rankings yet, but as of when I'm recording this, they've not updated the rankings from this weekend's past fights. So, still number 15, which, not a bad spot to be. He's only going to move up, and there are a lot of interesting potential fights for anybody at 145, especially a guy like Bruce Leroy. So, I don't know who's next for him, but I just pulled up these UFC rankings, and I'm looking at that top 15 at 145, and man, it's a killer's row of fighters. I mean, you look at the guys right above Caceres, Barboza, Ige, Yusuf, Mitchell, Evloev, Topuria. I mean, my God, man. I mean, man, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what's next for Caceres, but it's sure to be a great fight. Man. I think somebody asked, actually, before we get into the main event in that terrible ass decision, somebody asked, I'll see if I can find it real quick. Somebody said, they put up a graphic and it had a lot of the undefeated fighters that are in the UFC right now, like undefeated right now. And they said to rank your top 3. So I did find it. And I thought about this because I just named 2 of those guys. Topuria is 13-0. Evloev is 17-0. And the question being posed was, who's your top 3 best undefeated fighters in the UFC right now? So they got I don't know if this is all the undefeated UFC fighters, but this is 8 of them. We got Mokaev, Shavkat, Umar, Gary, Evloev, Chimaev, Nickel, Topuria. All right. And I responded to the tweet, and my top 3 was Khamzat, Shavkat, and Topuria. But I put a little addendum down there that Evloev is a very close 4 for me. And I saw some other people had similar lists. Other people had Evloev at 3 instead of Topuria. I think that's totally fair and fine. I don't have any issue with that at all. I think maybe the level of competition that both guys have fought in the UFC up to this point, I think Topuria's might be a little bit higher. I mean, they are literally, Topuria is number 9 and Evloev's number 10 in the rankings. So, I mean, obviously, the media members doing the rankings and the UFC think they're very close. I think you could switch them. But I think they're both 3 and 4. Shavkat, if you've seen him fight at welterweight, I don't think that needs any explanation whatsoever. He is an absolute killer at 170. He's going to be a problem for guys as he gets better and starts fighting some of them top 5 guys. I mean, some of those title contender guys. And Khamzat, again, I don't think needs any explanation there whatsoever. I mean, just absolutely walked through and dominated some of his first few opponents, and then had that war with Gilbert Burns. I mean, that proved he belonged at the top of the 170 division. I know that Khamzat is supposed to be moving up, and that's all good and fine. Does he have a fight there yet? Let me see. Doesn't look like he does. If he wanted to fight Shavkat before he moved up to 185, I don't think anybody would have any complaints. 2 undefeated guys, one of them walks out with their record intact. I don't know. It'd be interesting. But also Khamzat at 185 would be interesting. And 185 does need, now that Izzy's the champ again and Pereira's moving up to 205, a little bit of new blood in the middleweight division, I don't think would hurt it at all. So, I don't hate it. I don't hate that Khamzat's moving up. I don't hate that Pereira's moving up, but middleweight needs a little bit of a shakeup now that Adesanya is the champ again. I mean, who's he going to fight? Is he going to fight Robert Whittaker again? I don't know. And, I think Khamzat should probably have to fight one person before he fights Izzy, just to see how he is at 185. I mean, the fight against Burns was hard. It was a very, very close fight. I mean, don't let the fact that it was a unanimous decision get you. I mean, it was neck and neck, like up until that last couple of minutes, So I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know who he would fight at 185. I have no clue. I think him and Robert Whittaker would be crazy. I think if you wanted to throw him someone a little lower in the rankings, maybe someone like Vettori, with his wrestling background and everything like that. I don't know. I think something like that would be cool. I think seeing a fight like that for Khamzat before he fights for the title would be good to see. Or who knows, maybe they'll just throw him straight into a title shot. And if they did, I wouldn't really complain all that much. But something that did get a fair amount of complaining this past weekend, and I think it was rightly deserved, was the decision between Amir Albazi and Kai Kara-France. Albazi got the split decision win. I don't remember the names of the judges or who had what scored for what. I know, or who had what scored for who, like what round scored for which fighter. I know one of the people that scored the fight for Albazi had him winning the fourth round, which is absurd. Absurd. Absolutely no excuse for that. I think the fourth round, I don't remember exactly what it was, but France outstruck him like 27-5 or something like that. And I think Kai Kara-France took him down in the fourth round. Like, Albazi did not get a takedown. He got outstruck fucking 5-1, and he got taken down. And one of those judges still gave that round to Albazi. I mean, truth be told, I don't even really think the fight was that close. I mean, maybe I think the most generous interpretation of that fight has Albazi winning 2 rounds. And, if a judge had scored 4 rounds in favor of Kai Kara-France, I wouldn't have really blinked an eye at it, to tell you the truth. But I think the most generous judging of that card, you'd give Albazi 2 rounds. I do not see how 2 judges could score that fight for Albazi. I really don't get it. It was not. I definitely don't think the fight was as competitive as they do, but it just kind of sucks for Kai Kara-France, because back when Figgy and Moreno were kind of going through their thing, I thought for a time there, and maybe still think it too. I think it very well still might be, that Kai Kara-France was the 3rd best flyweight in the division. I mean, while Figueiredo and Moreno were fighting 10 times, he was, making a name for himself. I mean, he was knocking out Cody Garbrandt and winning a decision over Askar Askarov, who looked very impressive in his own right. Kai Kara-France fought for the interim title against Brandon Moreno. That didn't go his way, of course, but I still thought there for that time that he was probably the 3rd best flyweight in the division, and that, with Moreno winning the belt back and Figueiredo moving up to bantamweight, it was probably only a matter of time before we got to see Moreno and Kai Kara-France fighting again. But now with the fight to Albazi, the loss to Albazi, this kind of complicates things. You can't really, I guess you can, but it would be pretty weird to just, ignore the results of this fight and give Kai Kara-France a title shot, because, and again, this is his 2nd loss in a row. He hasn't fought anyone. This fight against Albazi was his first fight since losing to Brandon Moreno. So he's lost 2 in a row now. He definitely needs a win to bounce back and, make the case that he should be fighting for the title or for an interim title or in the top 5 for that matter. But now you've got a guy who, Albazi, he's fought 5 times in the UFC and he's won 5 fights. Whether you agree with the France decision or not, it's a win. And I mean, Albazi was, I think he was ranked 7 before the fight with France. So now he's going to be, if he's not in the top 5, he's going to be right outside of it at 6. Does Albazi fight the winner of Moreno and Pantoja next? Maybe. He might. He didn't deserve to be gifted that decision, but he's a very talented fighter in his own right, and I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do with him, and I don't hate the guy at all, man. He's a great fighter. He really is. I mean, I don't have any beef with with Albazi at all. I'm just saying it was not a good decision. So I don't know what they do moving forward. It just is a shame that people like to complain that we have too many events and that the cards are too thin, which I've said before, probably on multiple podcasts now, that I think that that's stupid. There's more fighters in the UFC. They're putting on more cards. Yeah, they might be a little thinner, but I'd much rather have cards that are a little thinner than have, 2 weeks out of the month where we don't have any MMA on Saturday, where there's no UFC fights on. I'll take the cards that are a little thinner if we just get to keep having, fights all the time. They announced it on the broadcast the other night. They said, for the next however many weeks, there's a UFC card on every weekend, and that's something that doesn't happen if, they don't have as big of a roster as they do. So I think that whole argument, these are MMA fans that did not watch back in the day where you had to go, 2-3 weeks before you got to see another card. But one thing that people complain about all the time that I think is very fair is how shitty the judging is. It seems like every card there's a fight that's ruined by a bad decision. And, this time it was a fight between 2 potential title contenders at flyweight in the main event of the card. I mean, really just, it already wasn't, maybe the best card we've seen in a while, but it did have, like I said, Killer Kareem's knee bar finish and Jim Miller, his 23-second knockout. That main card had some highlights on it. It had some really cool things on there. There were some finishes in the prelims too, but the main card was starting to pick it up a little bit. And Kai Kara France, had a great performance in the main event, and it got undercut because 2 judges scoring the fight disagreed with everybody else in the world. And I just don't know what they were seeing, man. I really, really don't. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. It's a shame that, every weekend somebody is going to get screwed over by some incompetent judges. I mean, and I mean this, this cost people, money. I mean, I think Kai Kara France came out today or yesterday and said that, that split decision loss cost him $100,000. And that sucks, man. That sucks. Imagine if you're Kai Kara France, you won the fight, but 2 judges don't see it that way. And so now you've got, 2 losses in a row on your record. You're going to go down in the rankings. You're losing out on this money. You're losing out on probably what would have been, if he had won that fight, a pretty good chance he would have gotten the next title shot. I mean, I think so. I don't know that it would have been a guarantee, but I think it would have been a very good chance. And, I don't blame Kai Kara France at all for being frustrated. I don't blame him one bit. He has every single right to be frustrated with those judges. And so do any other fighters that have been screwed over by a crappy split decision. And so do the fans, There's nothing like, getting hyped up and watching a fight and, getting into it just for the judges to call the fight for the guy that was getting his ass kicked. You know, it like I said, it just undercuts everything you just watched. You're like, man, it was a great competitive back and forth fight, but the judges have just ruined it. And there is a difference between like a robbery and a close fight. There definitely is. But in this specific case, the Albazi Kai Kara France fight, that was a robbery. That wasn't just a close fight that the judges got wrong. It was a robbery. It was terrible. I can understand judges being split up and siding differently if the fight is really close round to round, but that's not what this fight was. And like I said, every week there's a card that blows up on MMA Twitter and online because the judges ruled the fight in a different way than anyone else expected. And I don't know what the fix is. I wish I could remember who it was. Somebody said, start interviewing the judges after a fight, make them have to explain themselves to the press, to the fans, to whoever. I don't think we're definitely not going to see that, but I don't know what the answer is because the commission picks the judges, and once they do that, it's just it's out of the UFC hands. It's out of everybody's hands. So I don't know what the answer is to fix it, but it is pretty goddamn annoying, if I do say so. Just while we've got a little bit of time here, I know we're about to run up on the hour mark, and like I said, it is very, very late. And I picked up a Diet Dr. Pepper from the store, so there's no caffeine in here. So it would be nice if there was, but boy, there isn't. But we will talk about UFC 289 coming up this weekend. This is another card people are complaining about. I know I already said my piece, but is it the most stacked pay-per-view ever? No, but there are some very fun fights on this card that I'm personally looking forward to. So let's hop into some of those for this last 10 minutes or so. Headlining the card this Saturday, we have the greatest women's MMA fighter of all time, the Lioness, Amanda Nunes, defending her title against Irene Aldana. I can't remember. It was originally going to be someone else, right? It was going to be Pena. They were going to run that rubber match back with Pena, which I would be. Well, I understand why they want to run it back because it is 1-1, but Nunes dominated that second fight. I think I heard her talk. I think I remember an interview with her saying that before the first fight, she got COVID and she didn't really feel 100%. Not really trying to make excuses or whatever, but she was clearly off her game that first fight, whether it was COVID or whatever else she was dealing with, that she said, whatever it was, she very clearly was not really herself in that fight. And I think her performance in that second fight really proved it. And it looks like Pena suffered some broken ribs during training camp, so she was unable to compete in this third fight. So Irene Aldana stepping up and taking the fight. And she's looked good recently. She had that fight with Macy Chizon. I think, I'm not 100% sure on that last name pronunciation, but she got her with like an up kick to the body, which is just, it's rare enough to see an up kick finish, but an up kick to the body, very strange. She's very good. In these past couple of years, she lost like Holly Holm and lost a split decision to Raquel Pennington a few years back, but she's been a very, very solid fighter in the women's bantamweight division for a while now, and kind of felt like maybe it was only a matter of time before she ended up getting a title shot or a number one contenders fight or something like that. And now she's going to get it. She's going to get to fight Amanda Nunes, and again, Aldana is a great fighter. These past couple of years, man, she's won some good fights. She's put on some good performances, but I really just don't see her getting it done against Nunes. I just don't. Nunes is like I said, the greatest women's fighter of all time. Someone asked that question on Twitter earlier today, I think. They said, is Amanda Nunes the GOAT of women's MMA? And there were a couple of people in there that were saying Cyborg, but it's not Cyborg. Let's get one thing straight. One, they fought. And that's not everything. You got to take into account a lot of other things. It's not just one fight. You got to look at their whole career. But let's be real. Amanda Nunes is the greatest women's fighter of all time. She just is. I mean, 2-division women's champ in the UFC, has fought everybody you can possibly think of, really. I mean, who is she not fought, in women's MMA that you would like to see her fight? I mean, she beat Shevchenko twice, who Shevchenko, I think, has an argument for being the second greatest women's fighter of all time. And she beat her twice. She beat Rousey. She beat Tate. She beat Cyborg. She beat Holm. She beat Pena. She got her win back against Pena. I mean, I don't really think there's an argument for anybody else. And if she looks as good as she did in the Pena fight against Aldana, I really just don't see Aldana taking home that belt at the end of the night. But we got some other interesting fights on the card, too. I think one that a lot of people are really looking forward to. Charles Oliveira is back, and he's fighting Beneil Dariush, which is a lot of fun. We haven't seen Charles fight since he fought Islam last year, I think October last year. Now he's back. He's fighting Dariush, who hasn't lost a fight since 2018. He's on a 7-fight win streak, 8-fight win streak, I think. He's looked real good in his previous couple of fights, and he's really just needed, he beat Gamrot last year. I think that was on the same card, no? Yeah, it was on the same card, yeah. Beat Ferguson, beat Carlos Diego Ferreira, but he really needs a big name to make his case that he should fight Islam next. And I think there's a pretty good possibility the winner of this fight, whether it's Charles, whether it's whether it's Dariush, fights Islam next. Now I could also see, because we know Poirier and Gaethje are going to be fighting for the bad motherfucker belt, I could see the winner of that fight fighting Islam next. I don't think that's out of the cards either. Maybe Volkanovski will beat Yair and come up and be the next guy to fight Islam. I don't know what they're going to do with Islam, but I think the winner of this fight, whoever it is going to call out Islam after they win, and they should. And I think it's going to be a good one. I don't really want to make any predictions just because I like both these guys so much. They're such fun fighters to watch. And I really just don't know. I don't know who's going to win this one. I mean, I'm a big fan of Charles Oliveira. I really do like the guy quite a bit. That streak that he was on there for a while, even before he had the title, just that big long win streak that he went on where he was knocking people out and submitting people left and right. I mean, submitted, the two guys I just mentioned, Gaethje and Poirier. So, submitted both of them, knocked out Chandler. I mean, just a killer, man, just an absolute killer. I mean, that run right there, he's been a staple of the 155-pound division for a long time, pretty much ever since I've been watching MMA. But this long win streak he went on and eventually winning the title, I mean, that's what cemented him as an all-time great 155-pounder. And I think everybody loved watching him win that title and going on to defend it. Who's not a Charles Oliveira fan? So it's hard for me not to say that I want him to win. And I can see him winning. I really, really can. But Dariush is unpredictable. He's crazy. He's a wild striker. Yeah, it's hard to imagine either of these guys losing this fight. Like I said, we haven't seen Dariush lose a fight in 5 years. And similarly, the only guy that Oliveira has lost to in the past 5 years was Islam Makhachev. And I would say that's not a bad guy to lose to, winning 11 of your last 12 fights and that one loss being to Islam, the current champion. I'd say he's still doing pretty good. I wouldn't really hold that one loss against him. If I was going to make a prediction, I would probably say that Charles Oliveira gets it done by submission. I do. I think Dariush can hold his own on the feet. I don't really have any doubt about that. And he don't get it twisted. Dariush is no slouch when it comes to grappling. No slouch at all. He's not. No, he's not. I'm thinking about whether Oliveira, if I want to say he'll win by submission or decision, because I'm not really sure. Because Dariush is good on the ground. He's got those crazy hands. People forget how good he is on the ground. I don't know. I got Oliveira win it. I don't know. Submission, knockout, decision. I don't know. I don't know what it's going to be. I don't know if it'll be a decision. But it'll be a fun fight. I do know that. No doubt in my mind that fight's going to be crazy. So really looking forward to that one. Maybe the winner of that fight will fight Islam next. Who knows? One guy that I wanted to make sure that I shout out here, he might be the last guy I talk about before I wrap this up, but Nate Landwehr. He's a Tennessee guy like myself, Tennessee native. Really has impressed me his last couple of fights that he's been in. He's on a 3-fight win streak. He just fought Austin Lingo in San Antonio. I watched him fight too, live in person. Was awesome. He got a performance of the night bonus for it. Won that fight by submission. Really fun guy to watch fight. Yeah, I even went back and watched some of his M1 stuff. He was the featherweight champ over there in M1. He was knocking people out. It's funny. He's on this 3-fight win streak, right? And he's won 2 of those fights by submission. And those are the only 2 submission wins in his career. He's 17-4. So he's been pro for over a decade, and he never submitted anybody until 2021, October 16, 2021. He got his first pro MMA submission win. And that means he's clearly showing improvement. He's really starting to put some things together. He had some fights that didn't really go his way in the beginning of his UFC career, but it just seems like, the pieces are really fitting together, falling into place. And he's getting an opportunity to fight Dan Ige, who, that guy throws down. He's he's had some fights not really go his way. Past few years, he's taken some losses, but they've all been to killers. I mean, Evloev, we mentioned him earlier, undefeated. Josh Emmett, the Korean Zombie, Calvin Kattar. There's nothing wrong with dropping a fight to any of those guys. They are just a bunch of killers. And he did knock out Damon Jackson earlier this year, first fight of the year, or first card of the year, I believe. And Nate Landwehr is going to get an opportunity to fight a pretty big name guy in Dan Ige, for what it's worth. He's a guy that you gotta win over Dan Ige under your belt. I feel like some of the people in that division, in that 145 division, start looking at you a little differently. So if Landwehr can pick up a win like that, I think is he actually, hold on, is Ige still ranked? He is 13. So a win over Ige might mean cracking into that top 15. And we were just talking about, how brutal that 145 division is. And being able to break into that, maybe get yourself an even bigger name opponent than Ige. I mean, everything's looking up and up for Landwehr. And, I'm just such a big fan of the guy. Anytime there's a fighter from, Tennessee or Texas, I got to root for him. I just have to. And I've been rooting for him his whole career. I've been rooting for him, particularly hard these last couple of fights because he's just been killing it. He's looked so good. Hopefully can get him in here on the podcast sometime. I think that would be really awesome. Just two Tennessee guys going back and forth about MMA, which is which is usually what the Below the Surface podcast is. I don't know. I'm looking forward to it. Like I said, people will complain about every card that comes up every weekend, but once you really start watching all these guys, and you just you get attached to different fighters for different reasons, and whether they're the very first fight or the prelims, or they're fighting the biggest fight of their career in the main event, you got to be there and root for them, man. You can't be online complaining about this and that and everything else. Just be glad you have fights damn near every weekend. And, the level of talent in the UFC has never been bigger than it is right now. It's never been greater than it is right now. There's hundreds and hundreds, almost 1,000, just really high level guys on the UFC roster. And, I'll take watching these guys fight every single weekend over the alternative any day of the week. But yeah, no, that's Below the Surface edition of the Bonfire Briefing Podcast. Another solo episode, only my second one. So I hope wasn't too repetitive or anything like that. I didn't really come into the solo one with a plan. Like I said, up until a few hours ago, I was thinking, I might still have a co-host. So, if you made it this far into the show, really do appreciate you listening to the podcast. It's been awesome to see how much the show has grown over the past year. It's been over a year now that I've been doing it, which is wild to think about. If you're not already doing it, of course, go follow the Bonfire Briefing Podcast at Bonfire Brief Pod on Twitter and Instagram. If you want the more in-depth stuff, I'm more active on Twitter, if I'm being honest. So I do make all the podcast announcements on Instagram too. But if you want, if you just want a little extra commentary or whatever you want to call it, I'm definitely more active on Twitter and would definitely recommend following the podcast on there. You can find the podcast anywhere you watch, listen to podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, everything. So again, thanks for listening, and see you guys next week.